I'm so glad that I can actually see that from here. I was really worried sitting down there going, that's really low. I could be able to breathe. That's awesome. Go down in history as the man who opened a door. All right. I can't remember if it was a Saturday, but we were at the park. Okay, really, it was Belmont Beach. It was a fall afternoon. The sky was a crisp, unbelievable blue. The heat of the summer sun was starting to ease, and the fall day felt invigorating rather than sweltering. It was still early fall. The leaves were still green on the trees, that deep, dark green that tells you summer is really over. That fall was the first one that did not hold the start of another school year, since I graduated from high school before the summer started. And the floating, unfettered freedom I felt was even more dazzling than the perfection of the day. I was lounging at the beach in shorts, halter top, and bare feet, taking turns chasing down a frisbee with a few friends, and then flopping onto our blanket on the warm sand to rest. My boyfriend was with me. We were still fresh together, in a golden and lazy relationship that only comes with the absolute confidence and immaturity of being 19. I was living with him in a small garden apartment with ancient mud-brown shag carpeting that had been beaten so thoroughly into submission that it was beginning to disintegrate. And the kind of low, flat ceilings that kept you from pretending you were living in anything more than a glorified basement. Still, it had a front door and a back door. There was an actual room that walled off the utilities, so the furnace and water heater weren't in your face, and it was crazy cheap. We were in a shockingly great neighborhood, too, for that part of Chicago. The street was full of old Irish families who had several generations sharing the same houses, passing them from parents to children. The lawns were green and manicured, and the houses were all meticulously looked after. The family that lived above our little flat was the FitzGeralds, and only the two elders still lived there, Pete and Margaret. They were sweet and cheery, and they tolerated our constant stream of friends and loud music. In return, we were always polite. We looked after the yard for them, and we stood up to anybody in our group who failed to show them proper respect. On this day, of course, they had a break from our noise as we all hauled off to Belmont Beach for a swim and hours of sunning. We were tossing that frisbee around when we first spotted him. My boyfriend, Kevin, trotted over and pointed him out to me. Hey, look at that guy. I looked over and saw a man older than us, maybe a young 30-something, sitting on one of the benches not too far off and holding a very large snake. We all stopped to look, and the frisbee made a soft, slow glide onto the sand, unnoticed. Ooh, cool, I said to Kevin. Let's go talk to him. I started walking over with Kevin right on my heels. I'd always been fascinated by exotic creatures. I loved all animals, but back then I had a serious penchant for the bizarre. I dearly loved a spotlight. Even as a young grade school girl, I spent afternoons tending to bats hanging in the classroom refrigerator of my college student mother's zoology professor, so that he would let me hang a cold, sleeping bat on my finger and walk around the science department hallways, causing a fuss, until the bat would warm up enough to start moving. Then it was popped back into the fridge. So this snake was an object of total fascination. I had no fear of it. And the squirmy shuddering of the other girls in our group made me feel brave and special. We stood around this man, who stood up and showed off the snake. It was a 6-foot-long emperor boa, with smooth, dry scales and a gorgeous black, brown, and tan pattern, belly sections of an almost iridescent white, and a handlebar mustache right where one should be, on its upper lip. Its little forked tongue flicked in and out as he draped it over my bare shoulders. He showed me how to hold its neck just below the jawline to prevent a bite. It was surprisingly heavy to hold. He showed me how to tickle the snake's belly, making it squirm away from the tickling, which was useful to keep it from coiling too tightly around my neck in case it got nervous. Kevin stood watching, taking it all in, and behind him the rest of our friends had gathered in a loose and fascinated circle. The man was explaining how he would feed the snake white mice bought at a local pet store when it dawned on me that maybe he wasn't being friendly and sharing all this information with us just for the hell of it. So I asked him, "What are you doing out here with him?" "Well," he answered, "I have to move out of state and I can't take him with me. I brought him out here to see if I could find him a good home." One glance at Kevin's eager face and I knew we were both in. "We could take him," I offered. The man smiled and asked, "Are you sure? It looks like he really likes you." And just like that, we had ourselves a 6-foot boa. He handed us a pillowcase that he was using as a snake carrier. Our friends were all crowding in now to look at our new charge, and by the time I glanced around again, the man was nowhere to be seen. I didn't have a phone number, or address, or even his name. I just had the snake. Kevin and I looked at each other. "Cool," we exclaimed. I had visions of Halloween parties dancing in my head, imagining this snake being the sexiest, most provocative costume of all time. I carefully slid him off of my shoulders and into the pillowcase. I said, "We have to get him a cage. His owner said he ate this week, so we won't have to feed him for a few months. But we need a place to put him." Kevin said, "What are we going to call him?" Still wrapped up in my Halloween fantasies, I didn't miss a beat. Demon Seed. That's his name. We grabbed all our stuff off the beach and drove to the nearest pet shop. Looking at the giant aquariums, we quickly realized that anything big enough to fit him was going to cost us a ton of money that we didn't have. Kevin said, "I can build him a cage." "Really?" I asked. "How?" He said, "We could take apart our small entertainment center, nail some plywood to the back of it, put plexiglass on the front, and lay down some screening on the top that would let us drop in food, take Demon Seed out for Halloween parties, clean his cage and everything." It sounded like a plan. We stopped at the hardware store, picked up materials, and headed back home. By the time we had wrestled the shelving out of the entertainment center and nailed the plywood onto the back of it, the hardware store was closed. We had a delay because we forgot to buy glue to put the plexiglass on the front. Demon Seed slept in his pillowcase that night, in bed with us. We finished the cage the next day. That was good. We finished the cage the next day and I lowered him into it through the hole in the top and replaced the screening. He looked comfortable enough. I told Kevin that we should look for a thick branch or something that he could climb on, but other than that, it looked pretty good. I headed off to an afternoon shift of waitressing, and Kevin was going to have dinner with his dad, so he'd be gone until late. Knowing my mom's love of all things zoological, I called her up from work and asked if she and my sister wanted to come over and see my new snake after I finished my shift. She was appropriately excited, and we agreed to meet at the apartment. My shift ended and I headed for home. My mom and sister pulled up in her car just as I parked mine, and we all got out and did our round of hellos and hugs. I pulled out my house keys and we walked in the front door. I flipped on the light and in my best announcer's voice said, "Mom, Karen, meet Demon Seed," with a flourishing wave toward the newly built cage. I studied their faces and enjoyed the surprise and awe for a moment. Then I turned and looked down and realized that the look of surprise on their faces wasn't because they were amazed by our fabulous new 6-foot boa constrictor. The three of us stood there, jaws gaping, looking at an empty cage. It took us a few seconds to fully grasp the situation. Demon Seed had escaped his confines. There was a telltale gap where he had pushed out the screen cover and made his jailbreak. Suddenly, my short, stocky mother shifted her gaze up to the low, flat ceiling and started making these involuntary ducking movements. She and my sister started scanning the room rather wildly as they backed themselves toward the door. They beat a path to the exit and my mom called out her goodbye as the screen door slammed behind them. "Give me a call when you find it and I'll come back to see it. Bye!" My sister was already halfway to the car. It didn't dawn on me until much later how quickly they both deserted their youngest family member to the perils of hunting down a large snake in a small apartment. But fortunately, it only took me a couple of hours to find Demon Seed, wrapped around the warm evaporator coils underneath our refrigerator. It took me several more hours to tickle him into squirming loose from them and pull him out from under there. We reinforced the screening and put him back into his cage. With a few phone calls, we figured out that the reason he escaped was that the cage, and indeed the entire basement apartment, was rather chilly for a creature that needed to take its warmth from the environment. Adding a heat lamp to his habitat, along with the sturdy branch for climbing and sunning, made for one contented snake. He even fulfilled my hopes that Halloween by behaving perfectly, draped across my shoulders and wrapped around my hips as I wandered through the party in a sleek, form-fitting jumpsuit. An added benefit was the way that every girl in the room would shriek and run, and every guy made straight for me everywhere I roamed that night. Alas, some months later, I too found that the confines of that small apartment and the boyfriend who lived there were just too cold and lacking in warmth and comfort. And so, just like Demon Seed had, I gently nosed my way out that screen door and onward to find myself a warmer and softer place to land. Raven Ann Quigley!
Look into his eyes. He's been telling lies. He's a lover boy at play. He don't play by the rules. Oh girl, don't play the fool now. You're the one giving up the love anytime he needs it. But you turn your back and he's off running out of his cage. You're the one who sacrificed anything for Demon Seed. Do you really think that this about you when he's out? He's a cold-hearted snake. Look into his eyes. He's been telling lies. He's a lover boy at play. He don't play by the rules. Girl, you don't play the fool now. It was only late last night, he was out there sneaking. Then he called you up to check that you're waiting by the phone. All the world's a candy store and he's been trick-or-treating. When it comes to true love, girl, there's no one home. He's a cold-hearted snake. Look into his eyes. Girl, lives in his eyes. There's a lover boy at play. He don't play by the rules. Girl, don't play the fool now. Oh, there's a bridge. Does anyone know how that goes? Yeah, you can find somebody else better, girl. He can only make you cry. You deserve somebody else, girl. He's cold as ice. He's a cold-hearted snake. Look into his eyes. He's a lover boy at play. He don't play by the rules. Girl, don't play the fool. He's a cold-hearted snake. Look into his eyes. He's been behind the refrigerator. He's a lover boy at play. He don't play by the rules. Girl, don't play the fool now.
Kathy, what's up?
I got a new